I'm Yalda Hakim, live in Jerusalem. Tonight on The Wrap, the conflict in the Middle East escalates. As the United States and Israel strike targets inside Iran for a third day, President Trump hints at boots on the ground and gives an indication of how long he believes the war will last.
Right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that.
Iran responds with drone and missile strikes on Israel and on American allies throughout the Middle East, including on vital gas and oil refineries, and says it will close the Strait of Hormuz, fueling fears of an economic crisis. In Lebanon, Israel targets Iran's proxy, the militant group Hezbollah, as more countries are drawn into the conflict. As an RAF base in Cyprus comes under attack, the Prime Minister rejects US criticism of his decision not to join the attack on Iran, insisting he doesn't believe in regime change from the skies.
Well, we'll be discussing the day's biggest stories with the Daily Mirror columnist Kevin Maguire and the former Conservative Cabinet Minister Gillian Keegan. Welcome to both of you. And taking a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including coverage of how British expats are trying to escape the war.
Good evening from Jerusalem. I'm Yalda Hakim. Well, after a third day of strike and counterstrike, America and Israel's war with Iran is drawing more countries into a growing regional conflict here in the Middle East. Tonight, President Trump insisted that Iran poses an intolerable threat, and he suggested that the war could last 4 or 5 weeks or even longer. He says attacks will continue at full force until the US achieves all of its objectives. But quite what will be enough to end this war is still unclear, as more nations are caught up in the fighting. Well, since the United States and Israel began their operation on Saturday morning, more than 2,000 targets have been hit across Iran. They include leadership figures, nuclear and military infrastructure, and security forces. The Iranian Red Crescent Society says more than 500 people have been killed so far. Iran has hit back, targeting Israeli cities, Gulf nations, and a British airbase in Cyprus. There's particular concern about the economic impact of Iranian attacks on ships carrying oil through the Strait of Hormuz, as well as refineries in Saudi Arabia and Qatar. We'll have more in a moment about the impact of the conflict on the global economy. First, our Middle East correspondent Adam Parsons reports on the day's key events.
Iran is being pounded, attacked for a third day. The military might of the United States focused upon degrading the country that it portrays as the nexus of evil in the Middle East. On the ground, there is widespread destruction. The Iranian authorities say hundreds have been killed. But America's leaders are wholly unapologetic. They are bullish, and they show no appetite for stopping.
We continue this mission with ferocious, unyielding resolve to crush the threat this terrorist regime poses to the American people, and a threat indeed it is. Right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that. We'll do it.
Iran insists that it is the innocent party here, that the war against it is unjust and illegal.
The ongoing unlawful military aggression against Iran exemplifies the dominance of raw power over the principles of human rights.
Iran has responded with attacks of its own. This a strike on the Israeli town of Beersheva. Israel's air defense have coped with almost everything, but not all missiles can be stopped. The country is still shaken by the attack that killed 9 when a missile hit a bunker in Beit Shemesh. Today, the Prime Minister visited the site.
When I stand here in a place that was bombarded by the terrorists in Tehran against innocent civilians, you see the difference. The tyrants of Tehran target civilians. We target the tyrants of Tehran to protect civilians.
Well, that smoke trail up there is what's left of the Israeli air defense system intercepting an Iranian missile, part of a wave that is coming into Israel as we speak. But it isn't just this country that is being attacked. Iran's tactic is to try to embroil this whole region into a conflict. And the Middle East is in a febrile state. Israel has launched a huge assault on Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah, a group funded by Iran, which attacked northern Israel this morning. In Cyprus, the UK's Akrotiri airbase was hit by a drone attack. In Kuwait, 3 American fighter jets were shot down accidentally by Kuwaiti air defences. The crew all ejected safely. The conflict has touched Saudi Arabia for the first time, debris sparking a fire next to a giant oil refinery. The price of oil is already going up, and now Qatar has said it will halt production of natural gas. The country has also said it shot down 2 Iranian fighter jets, Russian-made Su-24s. Iran has launched attacks in Bahrain, in Dubai, and in Abu Dhabi. There are interceptions of missiles in the sky over Jordan. This is a conflict that is widening and which may escalate. Donald Trump says it will last at least 4 weeks, but the effects of this war may ripple for generations to come. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well, as Iran launched more strikes today, the country's security chief said Tehran was unwilling to negotiate with the United States on its nuclear program. And despite Donald Trump's call for people inside Iran to rise and seize power, there's been no real sign of that so far. Lisa Holland has been monitoring developments inside Iran and has this report for us.
Nobody was expecting a knockout blow. But as Tehran's skyline smouldered, America warned this is just the beginning in its quest for regime change in Iran. Already there are parts of the capital that look like a pummeled war zone. It's way too soon to predict how all this will end, and we're having to piece together videos which have emerged in spite of the largely shut down internet. But this billboard of mourning bearing down on Ferdowsi Square in the very heart of the capital in reverence to the assassinated supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, shows that 3 days into this conflict, his structures of power remain in place. As do members of his much-feared security volunteers, the Basij militia, waving the flag of the Islamic Republic, a clear message of control to those in polarised Iran who may believe their moment of revolution is near. There isn't a clear successor to the supreme leader, but this man, Ayatollah Ali Reza Arafi, is a name people are starting to talk about.
The Iranian nation will undoubtedly taste the sweet honey of victory. We are now in a fateful situation from which we can successfully emerge with the help of the people.
And another well-known Iranian politician, Ali Larijani, has also stepped into the power vacuum to quash any hopes of a resumption of diplomacy, saying the US had plunged the Middle East into chaos and the time for negotiations had gone. The bombing of cities right across Iran has brought hardships and fear to the Iranian population. This video shows an incubator taken onto the relative safety of the open street from Tehran's Gandhi Hospital, next door to the state broadcaster, the likely intended target. And in the fog of war, Israel and the United States are facing mounting questions over the devastating bombing of a primary school in the south of the country. According to the Iranian government, more than 150 girls were killed as they studied, and the number is rising. Iranians are paying a heavy price for the tug of war over their future, a war which Donald Trump has bragged is ahead of schedule, but which he says will likely last for weeks. Lisa Holland, Sky News.
Well, let's go to Lebanon now, where more than 50 people are reported to have been killed today as Israel targeted Hezbollah, Iran's most powerful proxy in the region. The IDF says the strikes have come in response to overnight attacks by the militant group against Israel. Sky's Cordelia Lynch reports from Israel's border with Lebanon.
Lebanon, a new front in a spiralling war. A delicate, imperfect truce, extinguished. This Israel's response to Hezbollah entering the fray. Revenge for the Iranian-backed group launching a barrage of rockets. In southern Lebanon, there's already an exodus. Highways gridlocked as thousands evacuate. But in Beirut, notes of defiance too.
We left our homes not out of fear or terror of the United States, but to fulfill our religious and legal duty to protect ourselves. They do not intimidate or frighten us. They will not make us retreat even an inch from the path of resistance.
In northern Israel, you can feel a conflict that's creeping closer. We are right on the border with Lebanon here. It's just over that mountain range. We can hear drones overhead. The Israeli army was firing just a few minutes ago, and there have been some loud thuds. Now, for months, there's been speculation that Israel may expand its attacks on Hezbollah amidst claims that the group was trying to rebuild its capabilities. And from here, right now, it does feel that that time may well have come. Avraham is tracking Hezbollah's movements.
That's the northern tip of Israel. We're right by the border with Lebanon.
A group hugely depleted, but not, he says, defeated. How would you characterize them right now?
A wounded animal. I think they're looking for an opportunity. I think they're rebuilding. I think they have been rebuilding and manufacturing more and more because they don't have the ability to bring in weapons from Iran as much as they did before.
We're in Kibbutz Hanita.
This is bits and pieces from stuff which was falling in my yard over the war.
Yoram is one of just a handful of people who didn't flee after the October the 7th attacks. And he's staying put now too, next to his personal collection of broken missiles and rockets. Do you feel any more vulnerable now, this time round?
Vulnerable? Never.
What would you like to see Israel do across the border in Lebanon?
I think that if in this particular time we will end the Hezbollah story, which is another ridiculous regional story, we can have peace.
You think that this could be the beginning of the end for Hezbollah in Lebanon?
I really hope so.
In Lebanon, the Prime Minister hopes a ban on Hezbollah's military activities will stop them. But in this expanding war, dreams could quickly fall apart. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News.
Let's go live now to Beirut, and our international correspondent John Sparks joins us from there. John, just in the last hour or so, the IDF has issued another evacuation order asking the people from the southern area of Beirut, the Dahia neighborhood, predominantly to leave and evacuate the area.
This is not what people in Lebanon want to hear. And there is one question that people here are asking themselves tonight, and that is why? Why did Hezbollah attack Israel when they knew that the response would be swift and it would be severe? And when I say the people of Lebanon, I mean just about everybody, from the Prime Minister to members of the Shia Muslim community that Hezbollah traditionally draws its support from. People just don't get it. The attack itself, which Hezbollah, of course, said was a retaliation for the assassination of Iran's supreme leader, it consisted of 6 rockets, 3 of which landed in a field. I mean, that barely constitutes an attack. It's more like a political message. It's more like message sending. But what was Hezbollah trying to say with that message? Were they trying to display loyalty to the Iranian regime? Were they following direct orders from the people who run Iran? Nobody in Lebanon is really sure about that. But what is absolutely clear is the Israeli response. More than 100 blasts across the country, the Israelis attacking from the air, from the sea. There's a drone above me right now. We've been hearing it for the last 20 or 30 minutes, a very prominent sound in the sky. And they've been attacking locations in the southern suburbs of Beirut, in southern Lebanon, the Bekaa Valley. As one person told me earlier, anywhere in this country where you find Shia Muslims, you've been hearing bangs today. On top of that, the Israelis issuing, as you say, evacuation orders in 55 towns and villages throughout the country, including neighborhoods in Beirut. That, of course, causes real hardship and mass displacement. It's cold here, and I can tell you that on the coast here in Beirut, you've got people bedding down for the night without winter clothes, without proper bedding. That causes real hardship. People in Lebanon, look, they think, we've been here before. The Lebanese government was working very hard to normalize relations with the Israelis, and Hezbollah have gone and they have attacked Israel. People are upset about it, and they're worried about being sucked into another major conflict.
John, thanks so much for that update. Well, the White House says America's aims for this war are clear. They include destroying Iranian missiles and preventing Tehran from ever obtaining nuclear weapons, as well as neutralizing Iran's proxies in the region. But President Trump is facing political pressure in the United States tonight over his decision to attack Iran and over what he should do next. Well, let's bring in our Mark Stone for the very latest. And Mark, we've seen several members of the Trump administration come out, whether it's the Secretary of War or the Secretary of State, Donald Trump himself, being questioned then about what the objectives are, what the strategy is, and frankly, what the end game here is.
Yeah, and if you believe critics of the White House, of which there are quite a few, the vibes and the reporting that's coming out of those who are very well connected but critical of the White House are that it is in some state of disarray. Now, I can't confirm that, but what I can tell you is that I've listened carefully to the president today. I was in the East Room with him. I've listened to Pete Hegseth, who was first out of the blocks this morning at 8 a.m. with a news conference down at the Pentagon. And this afternoon, I've listened to Marco Rubio, who not only is the Secretary of State, but he is also the National Security Advisor. 3 key figures. Incidentally, the Vice President's been kind of absent today, maybe someone who's a lot less easy with what's going on. But that's a side issue. But those 3 key figures have all articulated a slightly different version of what the plan is here. I mean, the president, sticking to auto cue, interesting, did list 4 objectives of the war. He said it was to remove the ballistic missiles, to remove the nuclear weapon capability, to stop the country from being a state sponsor of terror, and to stop it from exporting terror. 4 clear aims there, all very well, but how do you achieve those? That was not made clear. Pete Hegseth seemed to suggest, when it was offered the opportunity to say that there will not be any boots on the ground, declined that opportunity, leaving open the prospect of boots on the ground. The New York Post did an interview with Donald Trump where he said that it may be necessary to have boots on the ground. I mean, this is quite startling information that they are offering up for what potentially could be some degree of mission creep. They haven't articulated precisely what happens now and how long all of this will take. 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, Donald Trump said, didn't seem to matter to him. And he also said he's not worried about the polls. That's very interesting. I kind of wonder, is this regime change? Well, it certainly appears to be that. Or is it regime alteration? Would they be happy with a Venezuela model where someone else within the regime takes over and sort of pledges allegiance allegiance to the United States. I find that hard to believe that that would happen. Or is it regime collapse and kind of good luck to you, Iran? It's up to you now. It feels certainly like it is more like that. The other thing I want to point out that I thought was really interesting, Yalda, it's a comment made by Pete Hegseth in the morning news conference. Listen out for it here. He criticises the UK and others for not standing side by side because they're clutching their pearls and worried about legality. And then he goes on to talk about the rules of engagement, which apparently don't matter anymore. Have a listen.
Capable partners are good partners. Unlike so many of our traditional allies who wring their hands and clutch their pearls, hemming and hawing about the use of force. America, regardless of what so-called international institutions say, is unleashing the most lethal and precise air power campaign in history. B-2s, fighters, drones, missiles, and of course, classified effects. All on our terms, with maximum authorities. No stupid rules of engagement, no nation-building quagmire, no democracy-building exercise, no politically correct wars. We fight to win, and we don't waste time or lives.
Now, I've spoken to sources today who point to that and say, look, that's why we had, in the UK, we had difficulty with the initial operation. You heard it there from Pete Hegseth, no stupid rules of engagement. He is unconcerned about issues which kind of are the cornerstone of Western democracies and their militaries when they partake in this sort of thing. So that's why the UK government had a real concern about the initial operation. They didn't see an imminent threat from Iran that would allow them legally to join the Americans. But there's a nuance, because now that that has happened, now the initial operation has happened, it becomes a war of self-defense in part, and the UK is willing and able to be involved, legally able to be involved in that. But then, of course, when does defense become offense once again? The prospects for mission creep are huge, Yalda.
Mark, as always, thank you so much for all of your analysis there. So as my colleague Mark Stone was just saying there, a lot of questions still being asked, a lot of uncertainty about what the day after looks like, what the end game is here. We'll continue to monitor all the developments here on the ground from the region and, of course, from Washington as well as from London. But Anna, for now, back to you in the studio.
Yalda, thank you very much indeed. Yalda live there in Jerusalem. So a big political gamble, as we heard there, for President Trump against the backdrop of a widening conflict. So let's bring in our guests for this evening, Kevin Maguire and Gillian Keegan. It has been a very interesting day. We've had the war aims for America, questions too for Keir Starmer. We've had a potential duration, 4 or 5 weeks, we heard from President Trump, and now the broader impact, not just on Brits in the Gulf, for example, but also on the economy, oil and gas prices. Your first thoughts in this widening conflict now?
Well, it's escalating very quickly. And is that famous quote, no plan ever survives contact with the enemy? I mean, that we're seeing, real time, actually, almost real time. I was very surprised even at Iran's response, first of all, saying that they're the innocent party. They've never been innocent in anything, so let's not forget some of their actions, which obviously were pointed out in Parliament today, but also how they chose to actually spread and actually hit all across the Gulf. It would have been more sensible probably to focus their attacks on Israel, but now they've engaged everybody, almost got a coalition of people who are thinking, well, actually, they are showing what they could have done, and they're escalating it very quickly. And of course, that means the US are going to escalate, and Israel are escalating as well, as are Hezbollah and others across the region. So for anybody in the region, obviously, it's been quite shocking, and we've seen some of the photographs of, some of the sort of impact that's there right now, not only on tourists, but people who are living there as well. But I think nobody feels that what's going to happen next. Where's this going to be in a week? It's going to be 4 or 5 weeks, but what's going to happen? It's happening so quickly. Where are we going to be by Wednesday next week?
Yeah, wars are easy to start, far more difficult to end, and almost impossible to predict. But it is escalating militarily, economically, as well as the war of words. As we hear, I think no part of the world will really not feel the impact, either in terms of blowbacks in terrorism, should that happen, or certainly economically when that area is producing so much of the world's energy. So it's worrying and it's frightening.
Well, let's stay with that thought about energy, shall we, and the economic impact. Real concern tonight about the effect that the escalating conflict will have on global markets with oil and natural gas prices spiking. Iran has hit refineries in Saudi Arabia and in Qatar. Tonight claimed to have closed the Strait of Hormuz, which certainly Fox News in America, quoting US Central Command, has denied. The Secretary of State Marco Rubio said in the past hour that the US will roll out measures tomorrow related to the oil price spike. Let's hear then from our economics and data editor, Ed Conway.
There are potentially big economic consequences to what's happening in Iran. I want to start, first of all, with the geography of this and oil prices, but we'll come on to gas in a second. Gas is a really big deal for the UK. A lot of it comes down to the fact that getting anything in and out of the Gulf means having to go through this channel, the Strait of Hormuz. You've got Iran there, you've got the UAE there. It is basically quite treacherous, and there's a lot of ships that are very nervous about going through there. And as a result of that, you're starting to see impacts on things like oil prices. So look, this is the oil price, up by 9%. So, you know, a big rise, but not perhaps as big as some people had expected. But if that is closed, so that Strait of Hormuz is closed, you know, to 50% of traffic, that pushes the oil price potentially even higher. This is a projection. If it's closed completely, then you see that line going even higher. So there's that traffic issue, and it's not just oil, it's things like fertilizers as well. But there's also something else, because at the heart of this area here is something that's known as the North Field. That is the single biggest gas field, so natural gas, anywhere in the world. And although this is thousands of miles away from the UK, we're likely to become quite dependent on it. At least those are the current plans. This is showing you UK gas consumption 2024, this year that we're kind of due to be in at the moment, and then out into the future. And if you break down where that gas is supposed to be coming from, well, some of it comes from the North Sea, but you can see the dark blue bits, they get smaller and smaller because we've got less gas coming out of the North Sea. But look at the red. That's Qatari gas. And right now, so in 2024, it was only 2% of our supply came from Qatar. But just this year, it's expected to provide 10 billion cubic metres. And by 2035, you're talking about 20% of UK gas coming from Qatar, from that North Field, even more than comes from the North Sea itself. And that is why, when you look at UK gas prices, look at this. Just today, up by 50%, because people are looking at that and getting quite concerned. And this is only the highest since February 2025, and it's nowhere near as high as it got around the time of the Ukraine invasion. But just that increase alone, in percentage terms, it's the single biggest one-day increase that we've seen in UK gas prices going all the way back to 2022. In other words, when you look at what's happening in Iran, this could have serious consequences for the UK economy.
Ed Conway there. So oil, gas prices, keeping a very close eye on them. It's inflationary. Obviously, Kevin, we've been here before, and it affects all of us.
It does. There's no escape from it. I think some people may have already seen pump prices going up, and that'll go, you know, it's not just what you put in your car or your van. It is the whole supply chain of goods and manufacturing. No, absolutely. And so the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has an economic statement tomorrow. I'm sure it's been furiously rewritten at the moment.
Absolutely. Gillian?
Well, two things. I think, first of all, obviously the tankers have been going out over the last 3 or 4 weeks. That's signals to the market. So I think the reason the markets haven't had such a big jump or big loss today is because probably some of that's been priced in. Plus, you've also got defence going up whilst tourism's going down. I think in terms of oil prices, going to be what's really interesting is what Marco Rubio is going to come up with. They must have known. It's very easy. I mean, you could almost predict that this is the next stage that would happen. The oil prices, the Straits of Hormuz. I mean, this is the critical shipping lane. So I wonder whether they've thought through some aspects of this. It'll be interesting to see, because it happens every time, right? Every time there's a problem here, then it affects. There's global shock in prices, and oil prices affects everything, as we know.
Well, Donald Trump isn't a US president who's taking much care about the rest of the world, whether it's imposing tariffs and creating destruction there, whether it's pulling out of climate change treaties, whether it's bullying Ukraine, siding with Putin, or 101 other things we could mention.
Yeah, and they've done loads of disappointing things, not least on the 4th anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine. Sitting with, abstaining from that vote in the UN, which is disgraceful.
Yeah, we'd bring you papers normally at this time, but there's so much to discuss. We're going to proceed, if you don't mind, with what Sir Keir Starmer said today. He said he stands by his decision not to involve the UK in attacks on Iran, despite criticism from President Trump. Let's have a listen.
President Trump has expressed his disagreement with our decision not to get involved in the initial strikes. But it is my duty to judge what is in Britain's national interest. That is what I've done, and I stand by it. This government does not believe in regime change from the skies, and I thank him for his question. The lessons of history have taught us that it is important when we make decisions like this that we establish there is a lawful basis for what the United Kingdom is doing. That is one of the lessons from Iraq.
Yes, and Sir Keir Starmer making clear today he had two choices to make. One, join the attack. Two, open the bases, a decision that he has changed. Do you agree with what he has decided and why?
I think most of the British public from the early polling do agree with him. They're opposed to joining the attack. Some want to stay out. Then there's a group in the middle which is kind of like, just back off. So I understand where he is. But of course, he did shift his ground because it was not join. And then those bases, subsequently, we saw that 9 o'clock press conference last night. It seems so long ago because things are moving so quickly. All of a sudden, it's that the bases could be used to attack missiles. But of course, if you attack missile sites in Iran, it's where you're in danger of hitting schools and killing 150 kids.
Yeah, I mean, this is all about whether you believe in international law and the rules-based order. We're going to come on to the newspapers in a moment, which makes quite clear how the Americans feel about it. He's a lawyer, Keir Starmer. He has followed the rule of law on this. Is that the right thing to do?
Well, there's not one interpretation of the international rule of law. You'll have several that have been out there today. So Trump says he's disappointed in Keir Starmer, and I felt like saying, join the club. Literally, everybody's disappointed in Keir Starmer. And what is at the heart of this is the guy cannot make a decision, and he can't stick to a decision he's made. And that is a problem. That's a problem of leadership. Now, if you're going to be a follower, OK, be a fast follower. So he had enough information. He had Australia, Canada, Zelensky's response. So if you're going to be a follower, be a fast follower. Be trying to stand on this pin of well, first of all, the fig leaf of how he's interpreting, or phone a friend. He's always phoned a friend for a decision. It's normally an international lawyer, and it's normally the same guy. If he's really using that, then I think that's why he always has to change his mind. This is part of the problem. It's a modus operandi, and I seriously think it must be part of his training, maybe, as a lawyer, but he's just not decisive, and he doesn't stick with it.
I think he'd be quite brave here, and would have Tony Blair in 2003, if he hadn't have joined the invasion of Iraq, he would have been in a much better place, and
yeah, but he went
the UK would have been.
That was to go through the UN, didn't it? It was a completely different.
It was a different decision and a different process.
This debate is dominating a number of newspapers, not least because of what Pete Hegseth had to say about it. Let's take a look then at the Daily Mail, then, shall we? It has US criticism of Sir Keir Starmer, with the Tory leader Kemi Badenoch saying he is scared of his own voters, the US lambasting the hand-wringing and the pearl-clutching. The headline on the front page of The Sun reads, "In action this day," referring to Keir Starmer, saying the UK will not strike Iran even after the blitz on an RAF base in Cyprus. That was a drone attack, of course, just to point out. Telegraph also leading on this tension with the words from Donald Trump, "I am very disappointed in Keir." Similar headline on the front of the Daily Express, Trump is disappointed in Sir Keir over Iran help. There's The Guardian too, leading on the conflict in Iran, fears that the war may spread across the Middle East. The Metro highlights the strikes on Iran, calling it Operation Epic Chaos. Meanwhile, the Financial Times focusing on how the war in Iran has impacted the global markets and global energy supply. And there's the Times. I mean, many of the papers with these dramatic pictures on the front. The Times leading with Trump's warning that more strikes are still to come. The big strike is coming, according to the American president. So that tension between the pearl ringing, the Pete Hegseth, none of this nation-building quagmire, strength, that power is strength, the rule of law is through power.
But look, we have what Kenneth Clarke, a Conservative colleague of yours, Gillian, now here a long time, Cabinet Minister. Yeah, we have what in the UK what he calls a Tory press, and I'm quite struck as a journalist how the most right-wing papers, those who present themselves as most patriotic and fly the flag the most, are backing Trump and Hesketh. They've gone off with the US president and his war secretary. The Mail, the Express, the Telegraph, which is kind of like vying to be the mouthpiece of Trump in the UK, so they have an interview with him. It seems to be a few words, unless there's a lot more inside. But nevertheless, they project that very disappointed without any real context around him. They also say. They quote Trump as saying, look, never before had this type of rift with the UK where bases aren't allowed. Of course, Trump has no sense of history, or he would have known that Harold Wilson, who is the Labour Prime Minister most admired by Keir Starmer, refused to LBJ's request for Britain to join the Vietnam War in the 1960s, which I think made an absolutely correct call on that, and I think history will show that Starmer's made the correct call on this. Well, the Sun, which is always very gun-ho, the Sun's very gun-ho and backs almost every war, certainly Iraq, talks about inaction this day. Most of the UK population is against action and getting involved in this US-Israeli strike.
OK, but there's two questions here. One is the use of the bases, and the second one is involvement in these attacks that we've seen. Where do you stand on both of those? Should we have joined the attack, do you think?
No, but we were asked to use the bases, and I think that was a reasonable request, and bearing in mind what's happened since, and it was, they changed their mind very quickly. None of these headlines would be here if you'd have just made that decision. However, as going to, sending people into Vietnam was a huge decision. There are different degrees of decision, and they do all have to be taken carefully. I think this one, in terms of using the bases, particularly when we've got the bases out there, and particularly when, there's
Daria Fairford in Gloucestershire.
In Fairford, and also Diego Garcia, which, of course, is also part of this, Chagos and that debate as well. So to my mind, that was a reasonable, for your allies, if they're going to do this. And the assumption that a lot of people are making is that do nothing was a long-term strategy. Now, I don't know what intelligence they had. I spent only 7 weeks in the Foreign Office. It was like an internship. It was the Liz Truss period. But I was the Minister for Africa, and because lots of this stuff was going through Africa, Russia, Chinese, proxy, and also buying up and saddling these countries with lots of debt, I spent probably 3 or 4 days every week in the high side with all the intelligence, and it is mind-blowing what they have, particularly the MI5, CIA, MI6 and Mossad. So we don't have any of that. But we do know that even Keir Starmer said today, 20 attacks that have been thwarted here in the UK. Only one of those needs to get through. And, of course, if you are a terrorist, and they are state-sponsoring terrorism all over the world...
We saw the videos of suicide attackers in the UK last time after Afghanistan and Iraq, sadly. They left the videos explaining why they were taking so many lives, and the fear is there'll be a blowback here again. But Starmer realises, for instance, the Libya action by which David Cameron and I think it was Sarkozy in France pushed. Obama came in 2011. Gaddafi, Colonel Gaddafi was killed. The regime
subsequently,
was
not during that attack. Yeah.
Well, they took out his forces, basically, left him
They
vulnerable.
were
He
trying
went
to
on the
protect
run.
people who were in
and then he got
Benghazi.
caught, and he was brutally murdered. He was a brutal tyrant. No sympathy for him. But then you see, it leaves absolute chaos.
Yeah.
This idea, and Starmer says, you can't just bomb a country into democracy and freedom from the skies.
No,
what comes next could be worse. What is there? It's a terrible, well, was a terrible, still is a regime.
But if we look at Venezuela, you take out Maduro, you leave effectively the regime.
Yeah.
Is the idea here? They've said this is not about regime change, although Hegseth said it as an aside, but we sure did change the regime pretty quickly. You know, we all want to know what the intelligence was that the Ayatollah was meeting some very senior people in his compound that morning at 9:45. But the point is that maybe you're not trying to regime change. It's like Iraq, rather, where you pulled out the Baathists, you dismantled the Iraqi army, and you were left with nothing. And they then went to form the insurgency against allied forces.
It would be legitimate and desirable to have a change of regime in Iran. It is how you achieve that under international law, which I think matters in a rules-based world. We condemn the invasion of Ukraine by Putin and Russia. I think attacks by countries on other countries should be condemned too.
So does it matter if the US does not follow international law? I was looking at a quote from Stephen Miller, you know, he who is behind the throne, effectively in the Trump administration. Miller has dismissed international legal norms as international niceties. He has stated that we live in a world that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power, describing these as iron laws of the world since the beginning of time. So this is power through strength. This is the Trump administration.
Might is right.
And that is their law.
Well, to some degree, I'm not a lawyer, thankfully, or an international lawyer, but it seems to me that this all rests on whether something's offensive or defensive, and whether you can be offensive because it's a defensive reaction. Now, you could argue that taking out their nuclear capability when they've said they want to blow you to smithereens is defensive. And they have said regularly they want to annihilate Israel and the US. Right? They say this very openly, and they say they're building nuclear weapons, and they say they're having ballistic missiles, which they're hoping that can stretch to the US.
You're saying this has crushed.
What is offensive and what's defensive? As I say, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems that they're all trying to figure out whether it's just defensive. Is something offensive, defensive? Yes, of course.
That line of argument you could use to justify anything at any time.
Yes.
The US military have said there was no imminent attack, and of course there was a no nuclear weapons deal. The Obama administration negotiated it. We were signatories to it. Other countries were signatories to it. And then Trump just ripped it up. He's now saying he's trying to bomb them into getting what he destroyed in the first place.
He's trying to get zero, whereas that agreement, as you know, was slowing it down, and it was a 15-year slowdown plan.
It was a definite no weapons agreement, but you can have a civil nuclear program.
Yeah. So we know that Tehran has been under attack tonight, specifically the broadcasting area, which is where the state broadcaster IRIB is. I think on Saturday they moved the location of where they were actually broadcasting from. That came after a warning from the Israelis for certain parts of Tehran to evacuate. We also know that the US State Department has issued a warning to Americans to leave more than a dozen Middle Eastern countries, and that includes now Egypt as well as all the ones you might expect. Should we take a look at The Guardian, which is talking about the broadening conflict? The Gulf states we've already discussed has been sucked in. We know, indeed, Cyprus has been sucked in with a drone targeting the RAF base at Akrotiri there. So why is Iran, do you think, trying to suck in so many allies and neighbours in this conflict?
Create chaos, absolute chaos, and then the impact is experienced around the world, suffered around the world, because of course it's launched strikes on countries which weren't firing. But there's been improved relations recently, but there is the kind of the Arab-Persian split, Shia-Sunni split. We saw in leaked papers in the past that Saudi Arabia had said Iran must never get nuclear weapons. Everything must be done to.
This is Saudi. This is Saudi. While you're talking.
So it's, but that is it. It's look, Iran can't fight Israel and the US in any military capacity and hope to win a war like that. But if it spreads the chaos, the pressure will grow for the fighting to stop, because the cost is incredibly high. But if you look at The Guardian, you also see the picture on the front, right? And the regime in Tehran has slaughtered tens of thousands of its own people.
35,000.
And the Ayatollah had blood on his hands of Iranians as well as people in other countries. But you see here, it looks like a family, and it's just the terror.
The Guardian was up. Should we go back? I think it's... Our machine is flicking itself on, but if we go back to The Guardian briefly...
It'll be being suffered
it's a dystopian picture,
yeah,
no doubt about
absolutely. And, of course, the US and Israel doing the attack in that way will want to emphasise the strikes on military facilities and so on. But the truth is, there's 555 people dead. Many of them will be civilians.
According to the Iranian Red Crescent Society.
Yeah, and, of course, including all those kids, 150 or so in a school.
Yeah, I mean, just a quite extraordinary image there, as you said. We don't see pictures coming out of Iran very quickly, which is why reporting is often delayed, which is, difficult to give the true picture
that is in part
of the impact on civilians.
Yeah, and that's in part because it's an authoritarian regime.
Totally. So the Financial Times picks up on, as you might expect, the energy supply issues. Iran turns the fire on global energy supply. I mean, this is a card it could pull. But in a sense, it's a suicide mission for them, isn't it, given they export their oil to places like China, for example. So it impacts them too if they close the Strait of Hormuz by hitting a tanker earlier, for example. I mean, I know it's not theoretically, legitimately closed, but this is really significant, isn't it? What happens with energy now?
It is, and clearly it is going to have an impact on global energy price. We're already seeing that, and it will. I think they have a much broader appetite for pain in Iran. So when you say, will it affect them? Yes, it will. But, they're not a democracy. They actually do not care what the people think. They'll just, they've said, if anyone comes out, we'll kill you. Forget what's on the front of The Guardian. Yeah. If they come out of their houses, their own government will kill them. So the problem, I think, ultimately is they need to survive. And, of course, the regime change is really what's behind, or one of the aims of this war. And, they're completely diametrically opposed, and only one will win. But they do seem to... their economy's in a mess. They killed tens of thousands of people in January just this year. These things don't matter to them. So whether they have an appetite to take some more economic pain, which they've taken for quite a long time, it is different from, and again, what Kevin said about the public opinions. I mean, that's a quick poll. It will be interesting to see how that evolves, one way or the other, actually. And
support normally wanes the longer a war goes on.
And nobody's going to support a war, really, because, I mean, we're going to hear about the people who were in Dubai, but even, people who were there in the region, even though they've probably got a great defensive shield. It's scary. We have this peace premium. We have literally taken it to heart. We don't have the appetite that perhaps, my grandparents and your grandparents had when they had no choice.
Well, peace premium that got rocked in places like Dubai, for example, as you mentioned. We will be hearing after this break from some of those stranded Britons abroad.
Okay, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, eh?
Let's go. Watch, wait. Right, we're going to get in. Right, get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness.
If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera.
Turn around and go away.
Okay, but
Listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
But that is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Bangkok.
The only way they'll allow elections is if I'm inside jail or killed.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Free, wherever you get your news.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Seagal?
I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent. Sky News, the full story first.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Welcome to the world.
Come along for the journey, it'll be fun.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? This is the war game.
There were a number of armed security.
We want to discover, to find out what's really going on.
Everything you need to know about British politics in about 20 minutes. I actually don't like political drama.
So, where next?
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News. We're trying to see as much as we can.
Well, continuing with our newspaper, let's bring in the Times now. Big strike is coming, says the US president. This is Donald Trump speaking to one of the US networks, suggesting the big one is still coming. He feeds off the drama, doesn't he, in situations like this? But, again, another hugely dramatic picture on the front of the Times.
He feeds off it and he feeds it. Telling everybody what's happening next, how many weeks it's going to last. These are unusual strategies, I would think. I've never been in this situation, luckily, but I would imagine that normally you don't be quite so sort of open. And of course, it may not age well as well, because you're predicting something. And as I said, it doesn't survive any plan for battle. It's such a dynamic situation, more dynamic than I think if you'd have asked all of us, what do you think Iran would do? You would think they would have probably focused on Israel, not actually bombed everything in sight or tried to really sort of use all their missiles up in short order.
Yeah, the incredible picture on the front of the Times is also on the front of the Mirror and the Metro. I know. And see a child there. But the big strike is coming. How can you top killing assassinating the Ayatollah, a former president? Most of the leaders of the security apparatus. I think it's probably just Trump, and it is. He's playing the game shows. It's almost on The Apprentice again.
The United Arab Emirates suggesting there is a fresh range of ballistic missiles that has been fired from Iran heading towards them. Presumably their defences are up. There is a big issue about how many missiles there are versus how many interceptors there are, and who has the most and the cost of that too. And of course, some 300,000 British citizens are in Gulf countries being targeted by Iran, including, of course, holidaymakers, those in transit. We know Dubai, for example, is a big stopover. And, of course, those who've chosen to live and work in the region. About a third have registered their presence with the Foreign Office as the government works on contingency plans, they say, including a possible evacuation. We've been talking to some of those stranded. Let's have a listen.
On the first night when we had to go and shelter in the basement of the hotel, I think that was quite alarming. And we all woke up this morning to a very, very loud bang. We sort of jumped out of bed. So there have been moments when it's, you know, the anxiety's been quite high.
There have been moments where it was really scary and we had sort of an evacuation down into the basement and a lot of people very upset. But just trying to keep calm, trying to follow the guidelines, keep calm, do the logical thing and just sort of stay indoors. So we have sort of stayed within the hotel for the duration.
I think you'd agree that we haven't had much information at all from the embassy or the airline, so we feel a bit stuck and we don't know what's going on, really.
Well, Ed Davey picked up on this in the House of Commons, specifically those who have chosen to live in Dubai.
We rightly expect our brave armed forces to protect British citizens around the world in crises like this. But that includes tax exiles like Isabel Oakeshott and washed-up old footballers who mock ordinary people who stay in the UK and pay our taxes here. So as we protect them, does the Prime Minister agree it is only right for tax exiles to start paying taxes to fund our armed forces just like the rest of us do?
Anyway, half of Dubai is booking. Dubai residents have been driving to neighbouring Oman or even Saudi Arabia to try to secure seats on the limited flights, escaping.
Yeah, and Ed Davey picked on Isabel Oakeshott because she is the fiancée of Richard Tice, the deputy leader of Reform. Very, very right-wing. I know her. No reasonably well as a journalist.
She would do this show regularly, but anyway...
Yeah, no. And of course, yeah, I mean, she's kind of very anti-migrant in the UK, but she's now a migrant in a Gulf state, majority Muslim country. But you can't lift that number of people out. But I do feel those who are tax exiles, not those who've gone on holiday, not those who've gone sort of legitimately to work, but those who've gone to avoid tax. I do believe the Americans used to talk about no taxation without representation. I think no representation without taxation. I think it's about time we linked having a passport.
Okay.
So you have to pay tax anyway. Their tax receipts, their passports, just in case there's a war.
Gillian, Kevin, more from both of you in a moment.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Big Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Tonight on The Wrap, the conflict in the Middle East escalates. As the United States and Israel strike targets inside Iran for a third day, President Trump hints at boots on the ground and gives an indication of how long he believes the war will last.
From the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that.
Iran responds with drone and missile strikes on Israel and on American allies throughout the Middle East, including on vital gas and oil refineries, fueling fears of an economic crisis. As an RAF base in Cyprus comes under attack, the Prime Minister rejects US criticism of his decision not to join the attack on Iran, insisting he doesn't believe in regime change from the skies. Well, we'll be discussing the day's biggest stories with the Daily Mirror columnist Kevin Maguire and the former Conservative Cabinet Minister Gillian Keegan. Taking a first look too at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including coverage of how British expats are trying to escape the war. Well, good evening. After a third day of strike and counter-strike, America and Israel's war with Iran is drawing more countries into a growing regional conflict in the Middle East. Tonight, President Trump insisted that Iran poses an intolerable threat, and he suggested that the war could last 4 or 5 weeks or even longer. He says attacks will continue at full force until the US achieves all of its objectives. But quite what will be enough to end this war is still unclear, as more nations are caught up in the fighting. Kevin, certainly there is a sense of escalating and broadening, is there not?
No, that's right. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, and we're not quite sure what better will be, which presumably is just an end to the firing. But the US war aims seem still unclear. Talking about now 5 weeks, that's up to Easter, but what will decide when they cease? Israel's involved. Netanyahu is, I think, a lot fiercer. Iran and Israel have been mortal enemies for some time, and he's never accepted nuclear weapons wouldn't be developed.
Well, certainly tonight, the United Arab Emirates suggesting that their defences are dealing with a new barrage of ballistic missiles from Iran. You know, the threat is real.
Yes.
And it's impacting people right across this region.
And people are hearing it. They're sort of hearing it. They're seeing debris. I used to work a lot in that region. I had quite a lot of people I know who are there who've been messaging me today who said that it's unbelievably effective. It's very impressive, but...
The air defences.
The air defences, yeah. But they're just shows. And, when they went to bed a couple of nights ago, this is not what anybody was expecting. Anyone was going on holiday. There's a couple there from Liverpool on their honeymoon. I mean, this is just not what anybody expected or anybody really was prepared for. But there's something about... I mean, obviously, it's a mistake to try and follow Trump and try and be logical and try and sort of pick through, therefore, that means this. But how can you say it'll be over in 4 to 5 weeks and also hint at the same time there might be boots on the ground? Because that's going to take a lot longer than 4 to 5 weeks. I mean, you couldn't get them there probably in 4 to 5 weeks, let alone get them there and back. So I don't, again, is that signals to the market? But for people in the region, whether they're working there or whether they've gone on holiday there, loads of us go on holiday there. I mean, is there any one of us who hasn't, been somewhere in that region? One of those countries today, that big range of countries that have been hit, most of us will know somebody who's been there or have been there ourselves.
Well, the US State Department urging Americans to get out of broad sections, dozens of countries now including Egypt, for example. So the warning's going out. And certainly since the United States and Israel began their operation on Saturday morning, more than 2,000 targets have been hit across Iran itself. They include leadership figures, nuclear and military infrastructure and security forces. The Iranian Red Crescent Society says more than 500 people have been killed inside Iran. Well, Iran has hit back, of course, targeting Israeli cities, a British airbase in Cyprus and Gulf nations, including right now, it seems. In the last few minutes, as I said, the UAE said its air defences are dealing with a new barrage of Iranian missiles. There is particular concern too about the economic impact of Iranian attacks on ships carrying oil through the Strait of Hormuz, as well as refineries in Saudi Arabia and in Qatar. Well, we'll have more in a moment about the impact of this conflict on the global economy. First, let's hear from our Middle East correspondent Adam Parsons reporting on the day's key events.
Iran is being pounded, attacked for a third day. The military might of the United States focused upon degrading the country that it portrays as the nexus of evil in the Middle East. On the ground, there is widespread destruction. The Iranian authorities say hundreds have been killed. But America's leaders are wholly unapologetic. They are bullish, and they show no appetite for stopping.
We continue this mission with ferocious, unyielding resolve to crush the threat this terrorist regime poses to the American people, and a threat indeed it is. Right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that. We'll do it.
Iran insists that it is the innocent party here, that the war against it is unjust and illegal.
The ongoing unlawful military aggression against Iran exemplifies the dominance of raw power over the principles of human rights.
Iran has responded with attacks of its own. This a strike on the Israeli town of Beersheba. Israel's air defense have coped with almost everything, but not all missiles can be stopped. The country is still shaken by the attack that killed 9 when a missile hit a bunker in Beit Shemesh. Today, the Prime Minister visited the site.
When I stand here in a place that was bombarded by the terrorists in Tehran, against innocent civilians, you see the difference. The tyrants of Tehran target civilians. We target the tyrants of Tehran to protect civilians.
Well, that smoke trail up there is what's left of the Israeli air defense system intercepting an Iranian missile, part of a wave that is coming into Israel as we speak. But it isn't just this country that is being attacked. Iran's tactic is to try to embroil this whole region into a conflict. And the Middle East is in a febrile state. Israel has launched a huge assault on Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah, a group funded by Iran, which attacked northern Israel this morning. In Cyprus, the UK's Akrotiri airbase was hit by a drone attack. In Kuwait, 3 American fighter jets were shot down accidentally by Kuwaiti air defences. The crew all ejected safely. The conflict has touched Saudi Arabia for the first time, debris sparking a fire next to a giant oil refinery. The price of oil is already going up, and now Qatar has said it will halt production of natural gas. The country has also said it shot down 2 Iranian fighter jets, Russian-made Su-24s. Iran has launched attacks in Bahrain, in Dubai, and in Abu Dhabi. There are interceptions of missiles in the sky over Jordan. This is a conflict that is widening and which may escalate. Donald Trump says it will last at least 4 weeks, but the effects of this war may ripple for generations to come. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Jerusalem.
So we've already heard from the United Arab Emirates that their air defences are in action after another barrage of missiles are being fired towards them. This is the scene in Tel Aviv, in fact, as well. One reporter reading that sirens are being heard in Tel Aviv as well. We'll wait to see what happens in both of those locations. Certainly, I'm seeing reports that Abu Dhabi and Doha have come under attack this evening. It seems that Iran tonight is fighting back once again. We will watch that closely. Certainly, as the newspapers are reporting, there are real fears now that the conflict is spreading across more of the Middle East. We've certainly already seen it, haven't we, with the Gulf states being targeted?
We have. You start with that joint US-Israeli first strike on Iran. Iran then hits out. It's not just hitting out at Israel, it's hitting out at countries in the Gulf that have friendlier relations with the US and Israel.
Just listening in, actually, obviously, sometimes you can hear sirens across the city, but we'll keep an eye if someone can listen into us. We're here.
It'll be frightening in Tel Aviv and the rest of Israel. It'll be frightening in Lebanon now, in Qatar, in the Gulf states, in Oman, in Bahrain.
Doesn't this show the extent of the capability they've got, though? I mean, this has been very quick response to all of those places. Shows the threat is real. Iran is a real threat to that region.
And it's also hitting out at countries that aren't attacking it directly, which maybe Trump and Netanyahu would use as justification for their attack. But there's no doubt that the attack by the US and Israel has sparked what's happening now.
Well, I mean, it's
a brutal regime. It's a brutal regime in Tehran, which has killed many of its own people.
35,000 people they killed just in January, apparently.
I'd love it to be gone too, as many Iranians would. Others don't. Others support it because they have a vested interest in it and believe in it. It gives them their security and their livelihoods. But there are others. It's a young country, well-educated country. We've seen waves of protests over quite a long time and have been brutally put down. But history has taught us in recent years from Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan. Starmer is quite right. You can't just get regime change from the skies, or if you do get regime change, it's not always for the better, sadly.
Yeah, well, Israel has been bombing Iran tonight after a warning that parts of Tehran should be evacuated. It looks like they hit the site of the state border. I'm sure I read that they changed where they were actually broadcasting from on Saturday. Some dramatic pictures, though, certainly, that the newspapers have chosen from central Tehran. In fact, this is Nilufar Square, they say. People flee after a strike on a police centre, damaged nearby residential buildings. That's the picture in The Guardian. The Times has what looks like the same attack, different people also being carried away from there. A police building destroyed in a strike in central Tehran that also damaged residential buildings. And the Daily Mirror, too, with exactly the same photograph. Very, very dramatic, that your paper's also picked up.
It is. It's the impact of war, whether you're in Iran or you're in Israel or any of the countries we've mentioned, and it's your civilians get hurt. And Israel and the US will like to talk about precision weapons and targeting military sites and the regime, but so often the victims are innocent people, Iranians, whether in Iran or in Israel, or, as we saw, 70,000 in Gaza. The majority were men who weren't fighters. Women and children.
OK. Well, Sir Keir Starmer has said... Oh, apologies. Sir Keir Starmer says he stands by his decision not to involve the UK in attacks on Iran, despite criticism from President Trump. Let's listen to what he had to say earlier.
President Trump has expressed his disagreement with our decision not to get involved in the initial strikes. But it is my duty to judge what is in Britain's national interest. That is what I've done, and I stand by it. This government does not believe in regime change from the skies, and I thank him for his question. The lessons of history have taught us that it is important when we make decisions like this that we establish there is a lawful basis for what the United Kingdom is doing. That is one of the lessons from Iraq.
But the Prime Minister's position could be tested if Iran continues to attack British military assets, of course, within striking distance of missiles and drones. Our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes has this report.
Fighter jets at a British base in Cyprus scramble as a siren sounds the alarm. RAF Akrotiri is on alert after a suspected Iranian drone hit the runway on Sunday night, marking a new front line in the US war with Iran. The threat for the UK may well grow, with the Prime Minister saying American warplanes can now use British bases to launch strikes against the regime, but only to target its ballistic missile capabilities.
We are not joining the strikes. but we will continue our defensive actions in the region. France and Germany are also prepared to enable US action to destroy Iran's capability to fire missiles and drones from source.
Iran can still inflict harm in a number of ways, despite waves of US and Israeli airstrikes. Most potent are its arsenal of ballistic missiles, which are thought to have a range of up to around 1,200 miles, enough to threaten targets across the Middle East, but not to be able to hit the UK mainland. The Iranians are also armed with cruise missiles and a large volume of explosive drones. In addition, they have sophisticated cyber weapons, with the UK on Monday warning the public to be on alert for Iranian cyber attacks. Then there's the Iranian terror threat. This could include lone attackers using bombs to hit ships, troops or bases. And what about the possible British targets? The UK has thousands of service personnel across the Middle East and in Cyprus. RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus has the largest concentration of forces, as well as F-35 fighter jets. Dhekelia is another sovereign base here, run by the army. Over in Qatar, the UK uses the US's Al Udeid Air Base for operations, a squadron of Typhoon jets deployed here as tensions between the US and Iran escalated. There's a naval support facility in Bahrain, but without any warships. Oman hosts a logistics base, and there's a small UK footprint at a larger American facility in Dubai. Finally, Britain has a slim scattering of troops in Kuwait, Iraq, Israel, Saudi Arabia and Jordan. While the UK says it's not yet defending itself by launching strikes against Iran directly, this decision may have to change as the conflict escalates. And that raises questions about what the military could do after decades of defence cuts. Warplanes could bomb missile launchers, but there doesn't appear to be a submarine armed with bigger weapons in the region. As for air defences, the only piece of British kit that can shoot down incoming ballistic missiles is the Type 45 destroyer. 3 out of 6 of these warships are said to be operational, but none are thought to be deployed in the area. Instead, the US is providing the most effective shield. But if that wavers, the UK has very little in reserve. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
Well, let's listen also to somebody else who spoke out today. This is Pete Hegseth, who is the Secretary of State for War or Defence. Let's hear him.
Capable partners are good partners. Unlike so many of our traditional allies who wring their hands and clutch their pearls, hemming and hawing about the use of force.
Yes, and his comments, his criticism makes the front page of a number of newspapers, including the Daily Mail, which talks about the US lambasting, hand-wringing, pearl-clutching Starmer. He doesn't name Keir Starmer, to be fair, does he? He talks about allies more generally. Talks about not getting bogged down in the quagmire of nation-building. Anyway, direct criticism felt from the Americans today. The Telegraph, for example, quotes Trump as saying he's very disappointed in Keir Starmer. Was that about not joining the war, or was that about not initially allowing UK bases to be used?
I think it was about the bases, but the way Keir Starmer explained it in the Commons was as though I made the decision not to not to join forces. So he kind of answered a different question. So it's actually about the bases, which, of course, for whatever reason, his legal sort of phone a friend, he got some different advice a few hours later, or whatever it was, and then he changed his mind. So I think it was about the bases. And, if you look at this, and is it in Britain's national interest to support your allies? That is really the question that we're asking, and because that's the expectation here. And the support... That's not what
Keir Starmer is asking. He's asking if it is the right side of international law and deemed it was...
He said, I'll make the decision of what's in the nation's national interest. I will make that decision based on what's in the national interest. I actually would argue he's probably made it in terms of what's in the Labour Party's national interest, because they have very many more views and very many more, let's say, a coalition of voters that would have very different views on this. So I think it's the technocratic sort of dancing on pins.
I think this might be a kind of making and saving of Starmer is probably a bit too strong, but I think he's got the right position. I think people will back him.
Which one, the first one or the second one?
Certainly the first one. The second one...
Not to use the bases?
The second one, they've tried to put in T and Cs, which I'm not sure will hold, and the Iranians
for
probably
defensive purposes is
exactly. You're going to
suggesting.
attack missiles, but say not the TV station, the broadcast, and the Daily Mail, which became very hostile over Iraq. I think it's got its hatred of Starmer has clouded its judgment in the way it's presented this story here, because Trump is unpopular. Pete Hegseth, well, he's a Fox News presenter who's now living out his fantasies as
when you're Prime Minister,
as War Secretary,
you can't do this. You've got to make a decision.
You can, and we saw a few weeks back when Trump again changed his position on Diego Garcia, the military base in the Chagos Islands. He was for it, he was against it, he was for it. Then he became against it again because Starmer then made it clear he wouldn't allow it to be used.
Exactly.
And it's quite interesting how much has the Prime Minister, the Ministry of Defence, the UK been involved in the preparations for this? Were they asked to join the first strikes or just allow the bases to be used? There's a lot of...
That's what we were being told.
There are a lot of questions we need answering.
But the checking the legality about everything is not leadership.
Gillian, I think if Tony Blair had... You say, go with your allies. If you go back to 2003, the invasion of Iraq, Tony Blair would have put Britain's national interest first if he hadn't taken part in that invasion. It was far better to be France and Germany denounced by the US as cheese-eating surrender monkeys.
Yeah, but you keep going back to previous decisions, and they're all their own decision with their own set of information and their own set of intelligence. And there was lies in that case.
We are informed by what has happened before, and the consequences, we can see them.
Well, nobody has said there's the weapons of mass destruction and made up some big sort of dossier in this case, right? So that was the problem. The problem with part of the other decisions is it was made and it was explained on evidence that turned out not to be true. But I think, instead of litigating them all like with Keir Starmer's lackeys, I mean, literally, you have to make a decision when you're a leader of a country.
You're quite right. Saddam Hussein didn't have weapons of mass destruction, and...
But we had a dossier that said he did.
Yeah, we were fed lies. But has Iran got nuclear weapons now? How far is their programme? How big is it? I thought Trump had destroyed it, he claimed, with his bunker buster bombs earlier on. So, come on.
What we don't know is the reality, right?
But do you understand why Labour is utterly burned by what happened in Iraq? And Keir Starmer would be watching what happened to Tony Blair.
And the voting recently.
Happening to Tony Blair since that 2003 invasion of Iraq and what happened for 20 years afterwards. The Labour Party's decision-making is different on this than other political parties would be because of what happened in Iraq.
Possibly, but the dodgy dossier is a real thing, and they had that. They did that to themselves in a way.
And there are the lessons.
Well, they were seeking justification in
They were seeking justification that turned out to be over-egged.
There are lessons, too, from Libya in 2011 when David Cameron and Sarkozy in France got Obama finally to join them.
But that was ostensibly to save the lives of Libyans, wasn't it?
Quite right, ostensibly.
But that was the justification at the time.
So we're happy.
We all knew it was regime change to save their lives. You're quite right. Benghazi in the east of Libya was rising up. But we saw you can get rid of a tyrant, in that case Gaddafi, you can get rid of a tyrant in this case.
Look what they do without nuclear weapons in 2 days. What would they do with nuclear weapons?
They haven't got nuclear
well,
weapons. As you know, there was a deal that Trump destroyed to stop them having nuclear weapons.
We know that Israel opened another front was opened.
We know Israel and the US have got
Lebanon.
nuclear weapons.
So let's show you pictures of Beirut right now. This Israel says was because of attacks from Hezbollah. There we go. Let's just listen. Yes, clearly smoke is rising in the centre of your screen. You can also see the air defences firing as well. Hezbollah, an ally, the Iranians would say. We would say a proxy, one of the most powerful proxies of Iran in the region. Clearly, this was all part of the war more than 12 months ago now, in fact, well over 12 months ago, against the Lebanese in southern Lebanon, against Hezbollah. But once again, targeting, presumably, specific Hezbollah leaders.
as Israel assassinated or killed the leader of Hezbollah then, Nasrallah.
Yeah.
But there was a very interesting piece in today's Guardian, which was that Israel is very successful at assassinating people, but others just come forward. So it doesn't actually really work as a strategy.
Yeah, but what happened was deep infiltration of Hezbollah systems, pagers and walkie-talkies, which led extraordinarily for them to explode. I did read one report speculating how they possibly knew that the Ayatollah in Iran was meeting, suggesting some form of infiltration had also happened there. This will or won't come out. We'll wait to find out, but we would all like to know how Mossad, the CIA, maybe or maybe not, helped by MI6, but presumably not this time, found out that Ayatollah Khamenei was meeting senior war leaders at 9:45 in the morning because he'd been sleeping deep underground, and there he was in his offices, in his compound. You know, that intelligence absolutely led to the start of this war.
It's phenomenal, though. The Israeli intelligence services are phenomenal. I mean, you talked about the pager, how they knew and how effective they were. I mean, they have, I think, a great deal of respect across the intelligence community.
But of course, the Hamas horrific pogrom was an intelligence failure, a huge intelligence failure. But when they're focused, you're quite right. They use local recruits, and the piece I referred to earlier in the Guardian went into how they had local recruits. But it also said the Iranians get sloppy on the phones. And so they, using him in the presence of the Ayatollah, and it allows them to track. But this, knowing his whereabouts, knowing where the leading members of the regime would have taken years to piece together, and then they saw their moment. Although some people in Israel were saying it was 3 weeks. It was decided to do the attack.
Yeah.
The White House a day.
More sounds of either explosions or air defences actually across the Lebanese capital. The Israeli military has said it is striking Hezbollah command centres and weapons storage facilities in Beirut. Sounds very familiar when Beirut was also being targeted many months ago now, does it not? But anyway, that is another front, clearly, which is another indication of this broadening conflict in this war. Beyond the attacks we're seeing tonight, the United Arab Emirates suggesting their air defences are also active against another barrage of ballistic missiles. You see this action by the Israelis in Beirut tonight. There was one report that sirens in Tel Aviv were also sounding this evening. More broadly than what we're hearing, there is real concern too about the effect that the escalating conflict is having on global markets, with oil and natural gas prices spiking. Iran has hit refineries, both in Saudi Arabia and in Qatar. Tonight, it claimed to have closed the Strait of Hormuz, although US Central Command denied that. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, said that the US will roll out measures tomorrow related to the oil price spike. We'll keep an eye on these pictures, but let's listen now to our economics and data editor, Ed Conway.
There are potentially big economic consequences to what's happening in Iran. I want to start, first of all, with the geography of this and oil prices, but we'll come on to gas in a second. Gas is a really big deal for the UK. A lot of it comes down to the fact that getting anything in and out of the Gulf means having to go through this channel, the Strait of Hormuz. You've got Iran there, you've got the UAE there. It is basically quite treacherous, and there's a lot of ships that are very nervous about going through there. And as a result of that, you're starting to see impacts on things like oil prices. So look, this is the oil price, up by 9%. So, a big rise, but not perhaps as big as some people had expected. But if that is closed, so that Strait of Hormuz is closed, to 50% of traffic, that pushes the oil price potentially even higher. This is a projection. If it's closed completely, then you see that line going even higher. So there's that traffic issue, and it's not just oil, it's things like fertilizers as well. But there's also something else, because at the heart of this area here is something that's known as the North Field. That is the single biggest gas field, so natural gas, anywhere in the world. And although this is thousands of miles away from the UK, we're likely to become quite dependent on it. At least those are the current plans. This is showing you UK gas consumption 2024, this year that we're kind of due to be in at the moment, and then out into the future. And if you break down where that gas is supposed to be coming from, well, some of it comes from the North Sea, but you can see the dark blue bits, they get smaller and smaller because we've got less gas coming out of the North Sea. But look at the red. That's Qatari gas. And right now, so in 2024, it was only 2% of our supply came from Qatar. But just this year, it's expected to provide 10 billion cubic metres. And by 2035, you're talking about 20% of UK gas coming from Qatar, from that North Field, even more than comes from the North Sea itself. And that is why, when you look at UK gas prices, look at this. Just today, up by 50%, because people are looking at that and getting quite concerned. And this is only the highest since February 2025, and it's nowhere near as high as it got around the time of the Ukraine invasion. But just that increase alone, in percentage terms, it's the single biggest one-day increase that we've seen in UK gas prices going all the way back to 2022. In other words, when you look at what's happening in Iran, this could have serious consequences for the UK economy.
Ed Conway there, absolutely inflationary pressure again. We've got the Chancellor's spring statement. You were suggesting earlier that it might be being rewritten because of the impact of this. The Financial Times gone on, once again, global energy supply being shocked.
No, absolutely. I'm just looking at the figures, petrol pump price figures, projections. It's in the Met with the AA, thinking what petrol last month, 131.9p a litre, could go to 135.7p. But the RAC, looking at bigger jumps in the cost of oil, it could go up to 140 or closer to 150p for a litre. No, the Chancellor, her whole statement tomorrow, it's only about 20 minutes. She was intending sometime just shortly after noon, will have been completely rewritten now because we could be facing a great global shock. Now, it may not be as significant as after Putin's invasion of Ukraine, but it's going to impact us all. I mean, look.
Well, what it won't be is what she was planning on saying, which is, here's some good news, here's some money off your electricity bill, £117. We were just talking about that. There was a big hoo-ha about that last week. And I think a lot of the sort of very thin but, they're hanging on to this is showing progress. I think most of those will probably have to be replaced because they won't be relevant anymore. And, of course, what everybody's going to be looking for is some indication on defence spending. And even if it's not a budget, but even some sort of...
First of all, what is a... I mean, it's reintroducing.
She's only having
one. We don't have 2 budgets a year, isn't it?
She's only having one a year, isn't she?
Yeah.
So this is like a sort of just an update, I guess.
Yeah, it's the Office of Budget Responsibility. Yeah, and it's her response. So growth is going to be at 1% this year, a bit better next year. Unemployment's going to go up.
That's going to change as well, right?
Cost of borrowings come down, but she's got this 20 billion headroom, so she could now say she's going to accelerate the increase in defence spending and bring it forward a year or so. You've got to always worry about smoke and mirrors on that, but I'm sure it'll be very different now to how it would have been planned on last Thursday.
And many people will be asking, I mean, you've got all these people in Dubai and they're saying they're being told, that this is a very effective air defence, but there's debris falling. I mean, they're talking about these ballistic missiles, and this is why Iran is a threat, which, could get further and further. What would it look like here?
Yeah, I think we're some way off.
Defence. We are.
We're some way off.
Technology is one thing we know moves very quickly. Yeah. And don't forget the technology with AI. This is all moving very quickly.
If you promise an Iron Dome, you would get lots of ticks. So delivering it would be a lot more difficult.
Well, don't forget it was a drone that focused in Cyprus at RAF Akrotiri and, hit the tarmac, we are told. So drones move slowly, you can spot them coming. Nonetheless, it's changed the face of warfare.
Iran is a world leader in drones.
Shipping them to Russia to fire towards
an upside of this, maybe they can't supply Russia anymore because they're using themselves.
Well, that's why Zelensky supported Trump.
Yeah, sorry for people in the area, but look, people in that region are paying in blood. We will pay in pounds.
Should we take a look at all of the newspapers now? So let us start with the Daily Mail. As you can see, the Daily Mail has US criticism of Sir Keir Starmer, with the Tory leader Kemi Badenoch saying he is scared of his own voters, the US lambasting hand-wringing and pearl clenching. There is The Sun, their headline, "Inaction this day," referring to Keir Starmer, saying the UK will not strike Iran even after the blitz, as they put it, on an RAF base in Cyprus. Front of the Mirror, Middle East in flames, chaos and fear. And the Telegraph also leading on the tension with America with words from Donald Trump, "I'm very disappointed in Kiev." Similar headline for the Express. Trump is very disappointed, insecure over the help for his Iranian operations. There's The Guardian. It leads on the conflict in Iran and the fears that the war may spread across the Middle East. The Metro highlights the strikes on Iran, calling it Operation Epic Chaos. Meanwhile, the Financial Times focusing on how the war in Iran has impacted the global markets. And the Times leading with Trump warning that more strikes are still to come, while the Eye takes a look at how Keir Starmer and Donald Trump have clashed over the war with Iran. The Star is leading on Donald Trump's claim that this will all be over by Easter. Someone's done the maths on that, 4 to 5 weeks that he suggested it may take, although I think they were surprised themselves at how many members of the regime they killed, within the first minutes, in fact, hitting that compound, hitting the Ayatollah. I think that even shocked them, in fact. Let's take a look at the Metro, shall we, and pick up on that. Trapped Brits bed down in underground car parks is what they are saying. This is the next headache, isn't it, for Sir Keir Starmer? Talk of a mass evacuation seems almost impossible. Already it seems, if we look at the Financial Times, people are leaving in their thousands to Saudi Arabia and Oman. Half of Dubai is booking, is the quote there. Expats driving 10 hours to Saudi Arabia for flights out. It's the story below their lead story. I mean, what do people do? Some of them only there in transit.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the first thing they have to do is get to safety and stay underground. And then, obviously, the Foreign Office will be working, all around the clock to try and figure out flights. The problem they have is all the countries around, which usually you would say go to Abu Dhabi or go to Oman, etc., they're all also being targeted. So I think that is going to be part of the travel industries, who's going to be flying in which countries and how many flights they can be operating. But there will have to be, as you say, the Americans have also given the same advice for all of their citizens to get out. Well, there has to be a way to get out.
Yeah.
So,
but they do point out that airports in Dubai and Abu Dhabi cautiously began reopening yesterday. I see the UAE is once again, it suggests has its defences open because there's another ballistic missile attack from Iran. Thousands of flights, of course, have been cancelled. Qatar, other airports in the Gulf remain closed after this attack. What should people... I mean, who pays the hotel bills? I mean, they've got a non-eviction order that Dubai has put down on its hotels, so it can't evict people who are stranded there. But who pays those bills, for example?
I think there's going to be many disputes on this in the future.
It's very complicated.
It's very
complicated.
Does travel insurance cover this?
But is an act of war a cop-out?
An exemption.
These are going to... people need to be safe first, and then it's how you pay the bills. Secondly, I think most people will sit tight until the hotels open, because trying to get 300,000 people out, if it came to that, is almost getting on the scale of Dunkirk and taking troops
well, they could actually have some of these big cruise liners. They do go around and stop in some of these places. So, I mean, they potentially are sort of...
I'm
not sure they want to drive up to the Straits of Hormuz.
Not that route. I don't think they usually go up that route.
Well, let's listen to some of the residents, actually, for whom it's been a very frightening, few days. On the first night when we had to go and shelter in the basement of the hotel, I think that was quite alarming. And we all woke up this morning to a very, very loud bang. We sort of jumped out of bed. So there have been moments when it's, the anxiety's been quite high.
There have been moments where it was really scary and we had sort of an evacuation down into the basement and a lot of people very upset. But just trying to keep calm, trying to follow the guidelines, keep calm, do the logical thing and just sort of stay indoors. So we have sort of stayed within the hotel for the duration.
I think you'd agree that we haven't had much information at all from the embassy or the airline, so we feel a bit stuck and we don't know what's going on, really. Yeah, I mean, it will be an information vacuum, won't it, for many people. There have been comments in the Commons too. Let's hear from Sir Ed Davey, Lib Dem leader.
We rightly expect our brave armed forces to protect British citizens around the world in crises like this. But that includes tax exiles like Israel Oakeshott and washed-up old footballers who mock ordinary people who stay in the UK and pay our taxes here. So as we protect them, does the Prime Minister agree it is only right for tax exiles to start paying taxes to fund our armed forces, just like the rest of us do?
Do you have sympathy for that view, Gillian, do you think? I mean, the tax is, what is it, 5% income tax or something in...
There's a lot of British companies that have bases out there. I mean, I've worked for companies where we had offices out there. I've worked abroad myself in many different countries. They have different tax regimes. I don't think saying whether you should be able to expect your government to keep you safe depends on, as I say, taking your HMRC tax receipts. And, you know, they have a different tax structure. But actually, if you buy goods in Dubai, it's very expensive because they do have taxes, but they're put in basically...
like a VAT?
Almost like that, yes. It's on the prices of things. It's very expensive to buy...
He's got...
No taxation without representation, no representation without taxation. I've long thought the UK should make taxation
so what you really mean is no taxation, no evacuation?
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, I think you've just put it better than I.
So if you don't pay tax because you don't earn enough, then what?
You couldn't abandon people, could you? Because you would also take people...
Do expats deserve the British government stepping in to get them out of
having
the
been an
country?
Yes, but yeah, yes, and I don't think you could divide people. Somebody's on holiday, somebody's gone for a job, and somebody who's just who's just gone to dodge tax.
If you're sat in Liverpool, where I'm from, you don't need this, right? This is when your country needs you. When you've gone abroad and something happens, it doesn't happen.
And if you were taking people out, if there were French, German, any people of other nationals, and you had spaces, you would take them out too, and they wouldn't be paying you taxation. But I've long thought we should switch to. Taxation should be paid on nationality and having the passport rather than your residency, just as the US does. Yeah, you have to file a tax return. You take away your local taxes, but you'll still pay something to the country that you want to protect. And if you're a real patriot and not a plastic patriot, you'll want to contribute to.
Yeah. OK, I think we're going to talk about more of the stories, aren't we, now? So let's take a look at the Times newspaper, which is, Gillian, about MPs' pay. It is to reach 110,000 after an inflation-busting rise. Discuss, as they
never
say.
Popular, never popular. And, you know, and I think... I mean, what they do is they have this independent body that comes up with, and I think that's probably a couple of years, but they come up with the pay rise. And so the only choice you really have as an MP is to hand it back. Well, some people do that very sort of, you know, they say, I'm only going to take 35 grand or whatever the average is.
It's 94,000 now is the point.
It is,
anyway,
yeah, and it was a bit less when I was there, but it, you know, it has gone up and it does go up. And you know, the IPSA and this board sort of recommend what it should be, but it's never popular. And the agonies will go through, you know, do you give it back or, you know, do you... Yeah. And then when people say, you know, I always used to look at it because, you know, I'd earned a lot more before going into Parliament, but the point was you choose to do the job, you know what you're going to get paid, and whatever it is, people are always going to think it's too much for an MP.
Pay more to get the best people.
I think we pay. Look, if they're going to get, if this is recommended, that's what they should get. I'll do it as a basic trade union position. I think those MPs who say I won't take the increase or I'll give it to charity
are daft.
Well, no, they get a little bit of applause. I don't think they get any benefit at the polls by the time you get there. But I think the average full-time wage now in the UK is 38,000, just in some context. I suspect MPs now are, in the top 5-10% of earners?
Well, a head teacher, I think, of probably around 150, 160
so,
for
of course, there's going to be a backlash, and it'll be...
Secondary.
But if those MPs are voting to restrict the pay of other teachers, doctors, nurses, prison officers, police officers at the same time, or they're getting less than those MPs, then I think that's when there is a problem.
You're a losing streak from the beginning to the middle to the end.
But there's an hypocrisy in it. MPs are getting much more than other people, then that is an issue.
Yeah. Here's another talking point for you. This is the bottom of the front page of the Telegraph. I'm not sure you've got yours in front of you. I can always give you mine. Junior doctors claim to have ADHD and dyslexia to get out of night shifts, according to NHS leaders.
Well, there you go. There's another. ADHD has gone up massively. So there is a question as to why has ADHD gone up massively? Is there more we know about the diagnosis, or has there become other incentives in terms of, you know, people say about extra exam time and more concentration and things like this. But I hadn't heard that it was something that just come on in the day or the night time. So I think, I don't know whether there's anything behind this, but yeah, it's ADHD is something we need to understand, because it's not just differences in, you know, the past and the massive rise, but there's also differences in parts of the country. There's also differences within different ethnicities, within different groups. So,
are you suggesting it's wised up parents that are,
I think
making
there
that
will
difference?
be some elements of everything.
Okay.
So there will be the fact that we know more.
Are you sympathetic to people who've got ADHD, as someone who's, you know...
Yes, but I think when you're trying to solve special educational needs, there's a whole spectrum. Yeah. And what's actually happened is we're spending a lot of money, but nobody feels like they're getting the right kind of service. So I used to very openly describe it as a lose-lose-lose. The Treasury is very unhappy, and the local authorities are unhappy, the parents are unhappy, and nobody's... So the system needs to be massively reformed and make sure the money goes to the right places, because quite often it will go to a small number of people instead of to where it can make the most impact for people.
According to this report in the Telegraph, sourced to NHS leaders, the number of doctors saying they have ADHD is doubled since COVID to 6,000 now. I think we must avoid a knee-jerk over-diagnosis. It could well be people are being diagnosed now when they weren't in the past.
Yeah.
And
because
they kind of
was in the past, right?
Yeah.
It was almost impossible.
So,
we didn't know what any of this stuff was.
And is it creating a real problem and resentment, or do colleagues in the medical profession understand if somebody does have ADHD, they may require a different working pattern? I don't know. It's kind of it's interesting.
The social media
sourced
tips,
to NHS leaders.
But the social media tips is interesting because there must be some proof. Therefore, sharing social media tips of using this as a way to avoid night shift that would suggest that that somebody's somewhere.
But it's not necessarily a bad thing if you've got a condition and somebody says, "Oh, I've got that condition. I lessened it or coped with it and could continue working, so having to give up my job as a doctor." By not coming on. I know.
I mean, this is a night shift, right? For you?
No.
Yeah.
I used to hate night shifts when I did them properly. It was terrible. My dad used to work them every third week.
I've done 20 years of this.
But, he
20 years this time. Anyway.
He worked 6 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, 2 in the afternoon till 10 at night. And then the third week, he was down the pit 10 at night until 6 in the morning. Yeah. And it takes a real physical toll on you.
Yeah. OK. Loads of other very interesting stories. I'm going to read out some headlines very quickly. One is weight loss jab may help heart attack patients. And I don't know if you saw the Jim Carrey, who's a victim of a clone conspiracy. It's on the bottom of the Daily Telegraph. It does not have a picture, which is such a shame. It does on page 11, which we're not showing you. The actor Jim Carrey claims he did attend an awards ceremony after speculation mounted that he was replaced with a body double. Anyway, it's all really interesting, that. You're going to have to look at that yourself, that story. Lots more we could have talked about, but anyway, there's too much to talk about. As ever, can't have a longer programme. It's already quite long, isn't it?
And that would be a proper night shift.
Gillian, thank you. Your first go.
Yes, thank you.
A lot of news around. Really, really appreciate it. And Kevin, as ever, thank you very much indeed. We have Sport Next. Why Liverpool's Arne Slot might not have enjoyed this Liverpool goal as much as you might expect.
OK, there's a lot of firing going on. Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, eh?
Let's go. Watch way. Right, we're going to get in. Right, get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera. Turn around and go away. Thank you very much. Okay, but listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed
dinghy.
But that is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Bangkok.
The only way they'll allow elections is if I'm inside jail or killed.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Free, wherever you get your news.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Segal?
I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent. Sky News, the full story first.
We're rolling. I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Welcome to the world.
Come along for the journey, it'll be fun.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? This is the war game.
There were a number of armed security.
We want to discover, to find out what's really going on.
Everything you need to know about British politics in about 20 minutes.
I actually don't like political drama.
So, where next?
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Well, time for the spot now. Here's Mike.
Hi there. The England women's head coach, Sarina Wiegman, says they've been given safety assurances for their match against Ukraine. The match, which kicks off the Lionesses' World Cup qualification campaign, has been moved to Turkey because of the ongoing war in Ukraine. But there are now heightened tensions in that part of the Mediterranean because of the military action involving the US, Israel and Iran. The match in Antalya is just 200 miles from the British air base in Cyprus, which was hit by a drone strike.
We're in close contact with our government, but also with the people here that are responsible. So our security team is really in contact with them, and we're fine here. But they keep an eye on it and are in contact with them all the time, with the authorities, the responsible authorities here too.
Tottenham have been fined £26,000 and given a suspended away supporters ban from UEFA competitions after 3 supporters directed Nazi salutes at Eintracht Frankfurt fans during their Champions League match in January. Spurs have issued their own sanctions. They've said, "We can confirm that all 3 individuals found to be making Nazi salutes towards Eintracht Frankfurt fans have been identified and have received indefinite bans under the club's sanctions and banning policy." The club stands firmly against all forms of discrimination and has therefore taken the strongest possible action. The disgusting behaviour of a minority of so-called fans on the night is in no way reflective of the values of our club and its supporters. The Leeds head coach, Daniel Farke, has defended his team's fans after a stoppage to allow Muslim players to break their Ramadan fast was booed during Saturday's defeat by Manchester City. The game was stopped in the first half to allow City players Ryan Cherki, Ryan Aït-Nouri and Omar Marmoush to break their fast, during which booing could be heard around Ellen Road. Farke doesn't believe the fans intended to disrespect Ramadan. Instead, they may have thought that the break was an attempt by City to waste time.
I don't think it had anything to do with the break for Ramadan. I think no one was really aware. I think someone told me then it was like on the screen, but I'm not sure if in this moment everyone watches on the screen. And if it was from some people's point of view really out of being disrespectful, then it's not acceptable.
The Liverpool boss, Arne Slot, admits that he doesn't enjoy the football currently being played in the Premier League, but has accepted it's the new reality. He was asked about the increasing influence of set pieces this season, which has become a hot topic of debate. He says he isn't a fan, despite 3 of Liverpool's 5 goals in Saturday's win over West Ham coming from corners.
Do I like it? My football heart doesn't like it. Now, most of the games I see in the Premier League are not, for me, a joy to watch.
Well, there's much more on all of those stories and the rest of the day's sports news right now on Sky Sports News. We'll see you later.
Mike, thanks very much indeed. Let's take a look at the weather now. And it is looking mild, quite sunny and mainly dry for much of the week, but rain is expected in the west on Thursday. There'll be a mostly fine start tomorrow with an extensive frost in the north and west and a few fog patches in the southeast. In between, central and southwestern England can expect a little drizzle in places. The morning will stay dry and sunny for most, but southern England and the far south of Wales will be cloudier with a little more drizzle here and there. The extreme north can expect the odd coastal shower too. It will be quite mild again, less breezy than today. Cloud over southern Britain will edge into more of Wales and central England later on. Well, let us show you live pictures from Beirut, where the Israelis, after an evacuation order, have once again been targeting what they say is a command centre and weapons storage. We know also the Israelis have been bombing the centre of Tehran, again after a warning, hitting the state broadcaster. And we know too that the United Arab Emirates air defences have been dealing with a barrage of ballistic missiles launched from Iran. All the top stories are next.